Hey guys, welcome to another DashFight video, and in this one, we'll be talking about Street Fighter. This is a game which is as iconic as they come, and we cannot honestly talk about fighting games without talking about Street Fighter. Street Fighter 2 defined an era and was a cultural revolution which swept all around the world. And this was done largely on the backs of a fairly sizable main cast who have been almost synonymous with the game and continue to be popular today. But is there an argument to be made about these characters and their viability in future games? Is there a chance to progress Street Fighter and move past the World Warriors? If you like fighting game content, why not click on the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so that you never miss a video? You can also leave a like, that'll be awesome, and a comment, cause we love to hear from you. So if we're going to talk about retiring the original World Warriors, first we need to talk about who they are. The World Warriors is the name given to the original 8-person cast of Street Fighter 2. They comprised of series protagonist Ryu, sumo wrestler Honda, beastman Blanka, American patriot Guile, rich kid Ken, strongest woman in the world Chun-Li, Soviet wrestler Zangief, and mysterious yogi Dhalsim. These are the characters who have more or less defined Street Fighter from the very beginning, and they are all well known around the world. There were many reasons why the World Warriors were considered so awesome. For one, they were different from anything anyone had ever seen before. Fighting games had till then mostly been 2-character games that featured basic martial arts, but Street Fighter introduced special moves and such distinct characters that players now had a choice. What more, due to the variety of individuals and styles, players could now express themselves in ways they never could before. Also of note is the fact that the World Warriors were from various nations, with Japan, USA, China, the Soviet Union, India, and even Brazil being represented. This not only presented an air of diversity, it also gave the characters personality and endeared them to fans from those nations who now saw them as some sort of representation within the game. What more, Capcom were committed to these guys. They appeared in every game, and considering the fact that there were so many of them, they became synonymous to what the game is. Now, this is hardly the first time that the idea of retiring the World Warriors has been raised. Every so often, someone online makes the argument and then is hit with, Capcom already tried it with Street Fighter 3 and it was a disaster. It is true that Street Fighter 3 New Generation was not very successful, but it is a little reductive to boil it all down to the absence of the World Warriors. Street Fighter 3 failed for many reasons, and we have a long detailed article talking about it on the DashFight website. The link will be in the description. But here's a bit of it. Street Fighter 3 had a very troubled development period, which saw a lot of background changes and general confusion as to how to move forward. They would eventually bring forth a decent game, but it had an effect on how long the game took to be made. This exacerbated a timing issue, as Street Fighter 3 came at a time when there was some fighting game fatigue, and Capcom had kind of stretched things with the endless Street Fighter 2 sequels. All this meant you had a game that was made for arcades at a time when home consoles were king, and one that used 2D when everyone else had moved on to 3D, and you start to see some other reasons why Street Fighter 3 did so badly. It wasn't even supposed to be a Street Fighter, and only became one when industry legend Akimon suggested they add Ryu and make it a Street Fighter. Now, was the roster a part of the problem? Yes, definitely. But hear me out here. I believe Capcom's mistake isn't that new characters were added. To further my point, bear with me as I use an example from the sporting world, football to be exact, or soccer as us Americans like to call it. So in England, there's a team, Arsenal, who won a championship in 2004 without losing a single game. It was remarkable, and the team that made it happen were considered automatic legends, but then about 2 seasons later, there were barely any of that iconic team left, and Arsenal declined as a result. The point here is that after creating a winning team, it was broken up too quickly with no succession, or new, fresh, young talent were brought in to replace the old guard with no one to properly guide them. Something similar happened to Street Fighter, and suddenly instead of Chun-Li or Guile or Blanka, you had Necro, Alina, Sean, and Alex. No explanation, no connection to other members of the cast. Nothing. They were just there. So how were fans supposed to connect? These are the reasons I believe Street Fighter 3 failed, and when you consider that a lot of these characters came back in later iterations and are much loved today, it's clear that it wasn't simply a character problem. Okay, so here are my arguments. 1, it could really enrich the story. And what do I mean? Let's face it, fighting games weren't so story focused early on, and Street Fighter was no different. It is true that Takashi Nishiyama, who was a big factor in Street Fighter's creation, wanted it to be a proper story and went as far as to give the characters fully fleshed out backstories, but it wasn't really going anywhere. Nishiyama would get more power over telling a story in King of Fighters, which had a proper narrative told through the endings of the game. Meanwhile, Street Fighter relied a lot on character design and was able to create a roster of characters so distinct and well liked that they have remained in the public eye for decades. But nowadays, stories have taken a more prominent role as people recognize how stories feed into the depth of a character. While Street Fighter might have missed the chance to create a compelling story with character progression in the earlier games, they now have a chance to do it properly by introducing new characters while slowly phasing out some of the older ones. I love Street Fighter, but I dare say that the story has been held back and could continue to be held back due to a lack of progression of the characters. Why else would Street Fighter 4 and 5 set themselves in between Street Fighter 2 and 3? This allowed Capcom to keep Ken, Ryu, and the rest of the cast as young, happy-go-lucky characters who were more or less in the same state of life they were from the start. This is in contrast to a title like King of Fighters, which has arcs like a shonen anime. You start with the Orochi Saga all the way to the Ash Saga, all with a smaller cast of characters, which allow for some of the names not in the main protagonist category to still have stories that go somewhere. We actually see Kyo Kusanagi progress as a character after the defeat of Orochi, and we see the likes of Yori Yagami move past his initial hatred of Kyo. A lot of the characters got satisfying canon endings, and this is one of the reasons KOF is such an amazing game. For better or worse, Tekken is also an example. While true that Tekken doesn't have the greatest story, we do see some progression. Take Jin for example. He didn't even join the game until Tekken 3, where he was more or less a generic protagonist. But then over time, we watched him grow and develop, and though he's still something of a generic protagonist, he at least developed. The same can't be said for some of Street Fighter's cast like Ryu, who spent almost all of the story dealing with Satsui no Hado, or Guile, who was looking for revenge for the same thing over and over and over again, or Nash, who they resurrected in Street Fighter V, only to have him die again. I must mention that Street Fighter 6 has already started in the trajectory I'm hoping the series continues in. We now have Luke, Jamie, and Kimberly as the replacements for Ryu, Ken, and Chun-Li, and by introducing them now and slowly building on them to hopefully replace the big three, I think Capcom have the right blueprint here. My second point is tied to the first in that secession is a great way to move the game from one generation to the next. No matter how you look at it, Ryu, Ken, and the other cast members were made for people of that era, so their sensibilities, motivations, and the rest work for old-timers, but might not resonate with the new people in the scene. Fighting games are no longer the purview of the 90s kid or the infamous 09ers, and the Street Fighter story should reflect that. It's why Luke, for all his faults, works as the new protagonist as he encapsulates the spirit of the age. He's ambitious, fun-loving, whimsical, in a very different way to Ryu, and very relatable. He's a great gateway to a new generation of players and fans. My third point is this, and it might be a bit of a hot take, but not all of the World Warriors are that iconic. There are a few of them that are carried by the greats and aren't so popular on their own. However, because of the moniker World Warrior, they take up slots that could perhaps have gone to another character. Check out these charts from 6 months ago that rank the most popular characters in the game. See the bottom 4 names? The likes of Blanka, E Honda, and Dhalsim aren't so popular in the modern era. Yes, I have seen Mena RD go to work with Blanka, but he's a 2-time Capcom Cup champion. He's entitled to do anything, really. But imagine if their spots were taken by Dudley or Sakura. They might still be added as DLC, but they will probably have been better as launch characters. Retiring the old guard makes it possible to advance the story of some of these other characters tangibly without being tied to the characters already there. Honestly, the current story has a lot of potential with Bison gone, and I really hope he's gone for good this time. There are some characters that don't really have a strong motivation anymore. What is Guile fighting for right now? If Capcom were to slowly phase out the World Warriors, how would that look? I think the secret to this sort of idea is a slow and steady procedure that doesn't alienate too many people at once. As I mentioned earlier, The work has started with Street Fighter 6, as we see Ken, Ryu, and all the major players take something of a back seat. The introduction of a new villain is also a great way to help with succession, as the exit of Bison has introduced the menace that is JP. The new characters introduced into the game are quite popular, which is a huge plus, and so in the next Street Fighter, letting go of the least popular of the main Street Fighter cast would be my suggestion. This could pave the way for old favorites like Makoto, Guile, and maybe even Rolento, or completely new characters like they did with Marissa, Manon, and Lily. A great option would be to build on something they are already working on in the World Tour mode, which is the building of some of these World Warrior characters as mentors to a new generation. Pun definitely intended. Capcom can't rewrite the past, but they can make use of a lot of the elements they already have to create a thriving environment for newcomers. This could be a great opportunity to even reintroduce Sean as a proper disciple for Ken, and could make him a much better character than he was in the Street Fighter 3 series. It is my hope that the Street Fighter story moves beyond the current top characters, and we start getting some fresh blood in the lore department. Street Fighter is a game I have loved all my life, and a story I want to see continue for me, and start for the new generation coming up. And with that, we have come to the end of the video. Let us know in the comments who among the infamous World Warriors cast would you exclude from a future game. Also, did you know that we have a Patreon? We have tons of amazing things on offer, including the chance to contribute to the direction of some of our content. Go sign up right now, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you'd like your daily fix of all things FGC, check us out on DashFight.com. Until next time, when we talk about an edgy, difficult topic, do take care, and we'll see you in the next video.